My wife is a stunning and wonderful creature, who is a blessing to me in every way. She does have one or two flaws though. One is her questionable taste in husbands. I'm willing to overlook that. But she also suffers from what is apparently known as misophonia, where certain everyday sounds like chewing, breathing or tapping causes intense negative reactions. Some absent-minded tapping on a desk from me can annoy her beyond reason. I also suspect that her misophonia is the reason why she also cannot stand listening to this week's Song of the Day artist. To be fair, she's not alone in this boat. John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols, is a huge fan of this artist, yet when he played her record to his mother, dear old Mrs. Lydon proclaimed that it sounds like a bag of cats. A description that I take umbrage at, I have to say. And I have to ask, Eileen, have you ever heard your son's records? Anyway, she is a record-breaking performer, the first ever female artist to reach the UK #1 spot with a self-penned song. Discovered by Pink Floyd guitarist Dave Gilmore, who co-produced her first album and who has become known to a whole new generation of fans thanks to one of her songs being featured prominently in a very popular Netflix series. I'm talking, of course, about Kate Bush. So, put on a red silk dress or a striped bikini and come running up that hill with me as we look at this week's 80s Song of the Day. Dame Catherine Bush was born in 1958 in Kent, England. She began writing songs at the age of just 11 years old. She was a prolific writer and in just a few years had put together a tape with more than 50 original compositions. Despite being rejected by a number of record labels, that tape eventually found its way into the hands of Pink Floyd's Dave Gilmore via a mutual friend of Gilmore and the Bush family. Bush recorded an official demo, Passing Through Air, in Gilmore's recording studio just shortly after her 15th birthday. It was eventually released on the B-side of Army Dreamers in 1980, making it the earliest Kate Bush song to be officially released. Bush was eventually signed to EMA Records at the age of 16 to work on her first album, The Kick Inside. The debut single from that release, Wuthering Heights, took her straight to the #1 position on the UK and Australian charts. It was released on the 20th of January 1978, that's 48 years ago, just last week. Feeling old yet? She was 19 years old at the time. As I said in the intro, this gave her the record for being the first woman to reach #1 on the UK charts with a self-written song, the first of many records that she would break. For a brief second, there was concern that this strange woman warbling about ghosts in the middle of a field might be a one-hit wonder, but her follow-up single, The Man with the Child in His Eyes, went top 10 in the UK and reached number 22 here in Australia.
He's here again, the man with the child in his eyes.
1979 saw the release of a second album, Lionheart, and then throughout the 80s, Bush released 5 studio albums in total. Another notable career milestone is that every one of her studio albums has made the UK albums top 10, with 1980's Never Forever and 85's Hounds of Love reaching #1. Never Forever's biggest single was Babushka, reaching #5 in the UK and #2 here. A story about a suspicious wife who begins writing letters to her husband under the pseudonym of Babushka, in an attempt to test his fidelity.
A pseudonym to fool him, she couldn't have made a worse move. She sent him scented letters, and he received them with a strange delight. Just like his wife, but how she was before the tears.
Now, the name Babushka was chosen because it seemed exotic, but Kate Bush had no idea at the time that Babushka was the Russian word for grandmother, something that seems at odds with the concept of the song, which is tempting her husband with the idea of a younger woman rather than an older one. The sound of breaking glass, which appears at the end of the song, was sampled using a Fairlight CMI digital synthesizer, one of the very first recorded uses of the Fairlight, which, as I mentioned back in my Duran Duran episode, is a good old Aussie invention. And one last little factoid about Babushka is that the warrior costume worn in the chorus was modelled directly after a book cover illustration by Chris Achilleos for the 1978 novel Raven, Sword Mistress of Chaos. Then came 1982's album The Dreaming. The Dreaming took 2 years to record and is considered Bush's most experimental album. Neil Tennant, as a writer for Smash Hits magazine, he would become later better known as half of the Pet Shop Boys, but he was a journalist at the time. He described the album as very weird, and some called it uncommercial. However, as Kate Bush herself put it, not too many uncommercial records go straight to number 3 in the charts. It is a very sonically dense and difficult album, but it is also one of my favourites. The wife hates it. A notable song from the album is the title track The Dreaming, which was in part inspired when she visited Australia.
The symbolise keep alive the territorial war. Erase the claim the place and say we dig for or jangle jangles in a bottle and a push him from the pull of the bush.
The song speaks about the destruction of Aboriginal Australians' traditional lands, specifically in the pursuit of uranium mining. And it features wooden percussion and the droning sounds of the bull roarer and the didgeridoo courtesy of the now disgraced Rolf Harris. And then there was 1985's The Hounds of Love, and the song all the kids know, Running Up That Hill. Hounds of Love was Bush's biggest commercial and artistic success. Running Up That Hill was the album's lead single, but it only peaked at number 3 on its initial release. And we probably all know the story. In the 4th season of Netflix Stranger Things, the song was featured prominently, and a whole new generation discovered the sounds of Kate Bush. And in June 2022, after all those millennials and zoomers started clamouring for a copy of the song, Bush got her second ever UK number 1 upon its re-release. This also led to some very remarkable historical achievements. She holds the record for longest gap between UK number 1 singles, 44 years between Wuthering Heights in 78 and Running Up That Hill in 2022. That beat Tom Jones's previous record of 42 years. It was also the longest time taken for a single to reach number 1 in the UK. Running Up That Hill took about 37 years from its original 1985 release to reach number 1 in 2022. That surpassed Wham's Last Christmas, which took about 36 years. And Kate is now the oldest female solo artist to top the UK singles chart. She was 63 when Running Up That Hill went to number 1, overtaking Cher, who was 52 when Believe hit number 1 in 1998. And thanks to the Stranger Things resurgence, Bush got her first US top 10 hit. Running Up That Hill peaked at number 3 over there. The idea behind the album is that it's 2 separate suites. Side 1 we can call The Hounds of Love, and side 2 is a 7-track concept album known as The Ninth Wave. It's a late example of prog rock in one sense, as Bush goes on a vision quest, progressively falling asleep, speeding over and trapped in ice, lost at sea, some kind of near-death experience or out-of-body state, and finally emerging into vigorous life and energy again. Other singles from the album included Cloud Busting, Hounds of Love, and The Big Sky. Then, a year later in 1986, Bush recorded what I'm calling our song of the day, Don't Give Up with Peter Gabriel, and it was featured on Gabriel's album So. The touching duet spent 11 weeks on the UK singles chart and peaked at number 9. The song actually won an Ivor Novello Award for Best Song Musically and Lyrically in 1987. The song is about a man struggling with unemployment and facing stress in his marriage, in part inspired by unemployment issues in the UK at the time, as well as photographs of poverty-stricken Depression-era Americans during the Dust Bowl period.
I was taught to fight, taught to win. I never thought I could.
Gabriel, who wrote the song, had not originally conceived it as a duet, intending to sing all the parts himself. But the chorus hadn't been completed at that point, and once it started coming together, he decided that the story would work better as a conversation between a man and a woman. Gabriel sings the male parts, speaking of the man's feelings of despair, while Bush's parts sing of hope and encouragement.
Don't give up, 'cause you have friends. Don't give up, you're not beaten yet.
The video by Godley and Cream is a single take of Gabriel and Bush as they sing while embracing each other. After the shoot, Gabriel remarked, "There are worse ways of earning a living."
Drove the night toward my home, the place that I was born, on the lakeside.
Ugh, he's so young there, he's still got all his hair. Kate Bush's last album of the 80s was 1989's The Sensual World. It takes inspiration from a lot of literary sources, William Blake and James Joyce, and the title track was intended to feature Molly Bloom's soliloquy from Joyce's Ulysses. However, when Joyce's estate wouldn't give permission for it to be used, Bush wrote her own lyrics that echoed the original passage.
He said I was a fly off the mountains, but now I've powers over a woman's body. Stepping out
The Sensual World got 2 nominations for Kate at the Brit Awards for Best British Producer. She, in fact, produced all her albums from The Dreaming onward, and Best British Female Solo Artist. Bush has been nominated for that particular award 8 times and is second only to Annie Lennox with 9. Robert Smith of The Cure said that The Sensual World was his favourite single of the year, The Sensual World was his favourite album of the year, and he included all of Kate Bush in his list of the best things about the 80s. Can't say I disagree. Kate has continued to work at her own pace into the 90s, the noughties and beyond, with large gaps between albums. Kate Bush prefers to make music while she lives life, not squeezing her life into the gaps around making music. In 2013, she was appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, or CBE, for services to music. That's why I called her a dame at the start. So there you have it, Kate Bush. A bit of a retrospective really, more than a song of the day, but I'll leave you with some more of Don't Give Up with Peter Gabriel. And I hope you'll join me next time for another 80s Song of the Day.
For every job, so many